What's happening around the world and what's happening here at home? A very good evening to you and welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sandro Ferdinando. Let's take a look at your headlines for tonight.
Any official who works in good faith will be protected in accordance with the Constitution, a statement from the Prime Minister. Sri Lankans stranded overseas due to COVID-19 will be repatriated through any means necessary, an assurance from the Army Commander. Large-scale deforestation occurring in Muthurajavela. His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith requests for it to be stopped immediately. Sri Lanka Army establishes the Army Corps of Agriculture and Livestock. Congress accepts Electoral College results, confirming Joe Biden's victory at the presidential election. Donald Trump pledges an orderly transition of power.
First up in news here at home, a special event took place at Temple Trees today to apprise state officials of the government's latest program on the development of rural villages. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa presided over this event.
Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and Basil Rajapaksa, who heads the Presidential Task Force on Economic Revival and Poverty Eradication, were present at the event. Ministers, state ministers, parliamentarians, ministry secretaries, district secretaries and divisional secretaries were among the officials present.
We understand the requests of the people. There is a gulf between administrative regulations and the demands of the people. Many assume that we will fall into trouble if we go beyond the legal framework. The biggest betrayal of the good governance government to the country was the imprisonment of state officials who worked for the betterment of the nation. We have understood this situation and have come up with a solution to this as well. We wish to state that we will provide legal protection to state officials who work in good faith to prevent them from being punished. Therefore, experienced officials will know how to move beyond the legal framework and utilize state funds for the benefit of the people.
District secretaries might be aware that there were large numbers of unsettled bills at the beginning of 2020. But this year, all of you commenced operations with the balance sheet that we aimed at. There are no unsettled bills. Therefore, we are requesting you to assist us in easing the process of achieving our objectives.
Although the Finance Secretary stated that the bills have been settled, there are several incomplete projects at schools in my district. In certain schools, buildings have been demolished to pave way for new buildings during the tenure of former Education Minister Akila Viraj Karyavasam. The Provincial Council itself has to settle unpaid bills worth 6 billion to contractors in schools. When we discuss with the people, they have a certain view. On the other hand, officials have another view. In Colombo, the people share a completely different view. Laws may exist in the country, but when implementing it, we must consider how it would assist us in fulfilling the needs of the people. I am requesting the public representatives, ministers, state ministers, parliamentarians, provincial councillors and other officials to visit villages as much as possible.
The President responded to queries on the damages caused to crops by wild animals.
We have already identified the human-elephant conflict. We have appointed a separate ministry and 2 presidential task forces to study the matter and to take relevant action. The opposition has stirred up protests against the problems posed by wild elephants in all points of the country. The protests are taking place, implying that wild elephant attacks began after I came into power. They did nothing about it, although the problem persisted for several years, and are now staging protests in the country.
The President has appointed a committee under Ministry Secretary on issuing permits for sand and soil mining. During the next 4 years, the committee will identify the quantity of rock, sand and soil in the country and the areas from which it could be mined. I believe that lands have been divided into 3 in all districts to allocate areas excluding ecologically sensitive ones for this purpose. At the same time, We will not allow lands to be released without approval.
And now in a story that is making global headlines, violent clashes broke out in Washington late on Wednesday as Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol and called for a rectification of presidential poll results.
Trump's Save America rally begins shortly after 10 a.m. American time on Wednesday. President Trump told the crowd he will walk with them to the Capitol to cheer on their brave senators and congressmen and women.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
Protesters are in the building.
Thank you.
Vice President Mike Pence and members of the Senate were escorted out of the Senate chambers. This process involved the Secret Service, National Guard, Capitol Police and the FBI. Donald Trump tweets, quote, "Mike Pence did not have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution," unquote. Rioters are photographed on the Senate floor and videos show some of them occupying seats, including the seat of the Speaker. The District of Columbia National Guard, about 1,100 troops, is mobilized to support local law enforcement.
To those who wreaked havoc in our capital today, you did not win. Violence never wins. Freedom wins. And this is still the people's house.
Trump finally called on his supporters to go home hours after the riot started, but spent a large amount of time in the 1-minute video lamenting and lying about his election loss. Congress reconvened to resume counting electoral college votes, and later Congress certified Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as the next president and vice president of the United States. The electoral votes were approved after both the Senate and the House of Representatives rejected objections to the votes in the states of Pennsylvania and Arizona.
The report we make is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be the president and the vice president according to the ballots that have been given to us.
Vice President Mike Pence, who as the president of the Senate oversaw the certification process, confirmed to Congress that out of the 538 electoral college votes cast, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris received 306 and Donald Trump and Mike Pence received 232, mirroring the results of November's election. President Trump released a statement committing to an orderly transition on January 20th, but repeating his unsubstantiated claims of electoral fraud. In a comment published on his spokesperson's Twitter account, he said, quote, "Even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January 20th, unquote. Twitter has temporarily blocked the president from using his own account.
But today's a reminder, a painful one, that democracy is fragile, and to preserve it requires people of goodwill, leaders with the courage to stand up.
Meanwhile, international leaders expressed shock and condemned the unprecedented scenes on Capitol Hill as a pro-Trump riot breached the U.S. Capitol yesterday.
Former U.S. President Barack Obama posted on Facebook, quote, "History will rightly remember today's violence at the Capitol, incited by a sitting president who has continued to baselessly lie about the outcome of a lawful election as a moment of great dishonor and shame for our nation," unquote. Former President Bill Clinton said the attack on the U.S. Capitol was fueled over 4 years of poison politics and lit by President Donald Trump. Clinton said the riot at the Capitol resulted from a combination of deliberate disinformation that created distrust in the system and pit Americans against one another. Former President George W. Bush released a rare public statement to strongly condemn the siege of the US Capitol by supporters of President Donald Trump. He said, quote, "This is how election results are disputed in a banana republic, not our democratic republic," unquote. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Thursday reacted to the violence in Washington, D.C. by saying, quote, "Democratic process cannot be allowed to be subverted through unlawful protests," unquote. He said the orderly and peaceful transfer of power must continue. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson wrote on Twitter, quote, "Disgraceful scenes in US Congress. The United States stands for democracy around the world, and it is now vital that there should be a peaceful and orderly transfer of power," unquote. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg wrote on Twitter, quote, "The outcome of this democratic election must be respected," unquote. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian called Wednesday's riots a grave attack against democracy. In addition, the European Council, Australia, Canada and Turkey, among others, condemned the riots. They all urged for a peaceful and orderly transfer of power. Russia said that an archaic US electoral system that does not meet the democratic standards and the politicization of the media were to blame for American divisions and unrest in Washington. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the storming of the US Capitol by supporters of Donald Trump was an internal US affair, but the blame rested with the US system.
Back in news here at home, another group of Ukrainian tourists arrived at the Mattal Rajapaksa International Airport today. Officials at the airport said that the group, including 193 Ukrainian nationals, arrived in the island at around 12:30 in the afternoon today and was directed for PCR testing. This is the fifth group of Ukrainian tourists which arrived in Sri Lanka under the pilot project of the government to revive the tourism industry of Sri Lanka.
According to an investigation carried out by the Epidemiology Unit, the most possible way through which the COVID-19 virus could have entered Sri Lanka, resulting in the second wave in the country, is from the Ukrainian airline crew that was quarantined at a hotel in Sidua early September last year. Speaking to the Daily Mirror, Chief Epidemiologist Dr. Sudat Samravira said this had been noticed during the course of the investigation by the Epidemiology Unit to ascertain the origin of the second wave in the country. He has added, quote, "There could be possibilities through which the virus could have entered the country, like illegal fishing activities, returnees who were not properly diagnosed, etc. However, we are of the opinion that the virus would most probably have entered Sri Lanka through the Ukrainian flight crew members," unquote. A flight crew comprising 11 members arrived in Sri Lanka from a Turkish airline on the 11th of September 2020 and were quarantined at a hotel in Sidua. These crew members had organized a reception within the hotel prior to their departure.
Anurukumara Dissanayake queried in Parliament today regarding the repatriation process of Sri Lankan expatriates.
The average rate at a hotel is around 3,000 to 3,500 rupees. However, they charge in excess of 12,000 at hotels to undergo quarantine. These hotels are owned by their close allies. This has turned into a source of income for the infamous businessmen supporting the president. How can they profit out of another person's plight? The quarantine process costs around 150,000 rupees. PCR tests cost around 16,000. The air ticket costs around 150,000. Overall, it costs more than 400,000 for a citizen to return to the island. If a person earns 50,000 per month, it costs the salary of 8 months for him or her to return to the island. Are you the true rulers? Sri Lankan expatriates need to register themselves at consulates, pay an extra sum to do so and enter themselves onto the repatriation list. That is the hardship you make our people go through. At present, if a person contacts COVID-19 at home, the other residents are not directed to quarantine centers but are directed to quarantine at home. Why do repatriates need to undergo quarantine at hotels? Moreover, Udayanga Veeratunga is bringing down tourists from Ukraine. Which quarantine process are they undergoing? They don't even complete 7 days in quarantine and go gallivanting to Mirissa in 5 days. Foreigners are being treated differently. The Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment has a fixed deposit of 1 billion. They used that money to purchase alcohol.
According to the information I have received, more than 60,000 Sri Lankans have been repatriated from the Middle East. Moreover, the cost of their PCR test will be borne by the Ministry of Health and the government.
Those undergoing quarantine at hotels have been charged 8,000 rupees on 2 separate occasions for PCR tests to be conducted. If you are sure that the Ministry of Health will bear the cost of the PCR tests, thank you very much for that.
The government conducts PCR tests on those who opt to undergo quarantine at centres instead of hotels.
We urge all authorities to not take this lightly. The President is toiling hard. He convenes meetings constantly, obtains the recommendations of medical and other experts. While the President is exploring all possible avenues of resolving this issue, a group is attempting to sabotage it. We cannot allow the group to destroy the government. The people have high expectations of this government. Past governments destroyed this country and the people worked hard to bring this government into power. The repatriation process needs to be streamlined.
Meanwhile, Minister of Sports Namal Rajapaksa in a tweet said the number of repatriation flights will be increased within the next week. He added that government quarantine centres will be provided to all returnees and quarantining at hotels, which requires payment, is not mandatory. The minister concludes his tweet by thanking President Rajapaksa for his commitment towards resolving the issues encountered when repatriating those stranded overseas.
I believe the 1,751 expatriates who returned to the country so far have tested positive for COVID-19, but we did not halt the process. We try to repatriate Sri Lankans by deploying various mechanisms. At the same time, we are implementing a pilot project to examine the possibility of bringing down tourists to uplift the tourism sector. Initially, we carried out a pilot project to repatriate Sri Lankans as well. We hope that the latest pilot project will be a success. If that is the case, we will try to bring down tourists through the country without causing any harm to the locals, just as we did with expatriates.
Meanwhile, the Director General of Health Services has issued health guidelines to be followed when bringing down tourists to Sri Lanka. According to the guidelines, all tourists must undergo a PCR test 96 hours prior to boarding their flight to Sri Lanka. Tourists must pay for 2 PCR tests if they are remaining in Sri Lanka for 7 days, or pre-PCR tests if they are remaining in the island for more than 7 days. However, these guidelines will not be applicable for individuals travelling to Sri Lanka on business visas. All tourists must obtain a COVID-19 insurance valued at 5 million Sri Lankan rupees. Tourists who test negative for COVID-19 in the PCR tests conducted after they arrive in Sri Lanka will be allowed to travel to other hotels in a bio bubble. The National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19, the Tourist Board and the Ministry of Health has specified 14 zones to which foreign tourists can travel within a bio bubble.
The inauguration of the Sri Lanka Army's Agricultural and Livestock Corps today took place. The event took place at the Army headquarters under the patronage of Army Commander General Shavindra Silva.
The Sri Lanka Army's Agriculture and Livestock Corps had been established under the government's policy framework titled Vistas of Prosperity and Splendour. During the event, the Army Commander inspected the yields of cultivation plots at the Army headquarters. The newly established Corps will be led by Major General Indrajit Kandanarachi, who serves as the Director General of the Directorate of Agriculture and Livestock.
I wish to say that our efforts in establishing a self-sufficient society by promoting local agricultural production have proved to be effective. Based on the instructions of the Director General, we will begin the cultivation of paddy, coconut, mango, kidney beans, maize and cashew on cultivation plots manned by Army and abandoned arable lands belonging to the government. The Sri Lanka Army has been able to begin these activities given the capability and commitment of the Director General. Throughout the past, even during the nearly 3-decade-long war, we had to import ration packs to meet the requirements of the Tri-Forces and the police. The Sri Lanka government had to spend foreign currency to make these purchases. We take great pride in declaring that the Sri Lanka Army is now able to manufacture and distribute these packs.
The new corps comprises 5 units, including a permanent regiment and 4 volunteer units. Minister of Agriculture Mahindananda Alutkamage spoke about the government's plans to purchase paddy from local farmers.
We expect the country's agricultural harvest to reach 2.8 million metric tons this harvesting season. This includes 1.9 million metric tons of paddy. Within a single season, we hope to reap a harvest that can meet the country's requirements for 10 months, starting from February. Through the Paddy Marketing Board, we hope to purchase 300,000 metric tons of paddy harvest. The Cabinet has approved a proposal to purchase rice of the Nadu variety at 50 rupees a kilo and the Samba variety at 52 rupees. Since the purchasing price is around 50 rupees, it would be beneficial to the farmers as well.
Our greatest national resource is the sea that surrounds us. Over 8 times the size of our landmass. Let's proudly call it what it is. The Sea of Sri Lanka.
Struggling to find reliable plumbers, electricians, gardeners and other service providers? Bellboys got you covered.
In more local news, the Customs Narcotics Control Unit seized a large haul of 18,000 narcotic pills today. According to the Department of Customs, the narcotics had been smuggled into the country from Belgium. The cost of the narcotic pills, weighing 9 kilos, has been valued at 130.5 million rupees. The contraband had been detected upon the inspection of certain parcels at the Central Mail Exchange. In more local news, a wall at the Temple of the Tooth Relic has collapsed owing to the heavy rains experienced in Kandy yesterday.
A wall had collapsed in the vicinity of the Sri Vishnu Devalaya at the premises of the temple yesterday. A correspondent reported that a portion of the wall extending up to 100 meters had collapsed due to heavy rains. The chief lay custodian of the temple, Pradeep Nilangadala, said that the relevant units, including the Department of Archaeology, have been notified about the incident.
Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, commented on the environmental destruction taking place in the vicinity of wetlands in Muthurajavela.
Venerable Pahi Angalananda Sagara Thera of the Surakimu Sri Lanka movement and representatives of other environmentalist groups attended the media briefing. According to the Gazette 947/13 published on the 30th of October 1996, this area is located to the south of the Negombo Lagoon, has been identified as a sanctuary. Against such a backdrop, a gazette was issued on the 13th of October in 2006 by the then Environmental Minister Maithripala Sirisena, declaring that several lands in the area could be used for development. Recently, the signboards indicating sanctuaries in the area had been removed and replaced with boards claiming private ownership of the land. How was the Muthurajavela Forest Reserve belonging to the Wildlife Department transferred to a private company? We have been informed that the land spanning across 700 acres has been acquired by a certain company after making a payment to the Gampaha office of the Agrarian Services Centre. The company had planned out development projects involving sand filling. We have received a booklet issued by the company. We oppose this project. This cannot be allowed to continue. We will not allow this to continue either. This country does not belong to its rulers. The company is controlling the economy of foreign entities. It belongs to us. Therefore, the administration had been given the responsibility of looking after the country for 5 years. No one has given them ownership rights. Therefore, we cannot allow development projects to take place in the area by destroying the biodiversity in that ecological system. We oppose that. The project has to be carried out under the laws of this country. The relevant entities will be forced out of the project if they avoid the law.
Environmental destruction is taking place across 1,200 acres of land. Thugs have been deployed to those areas to threaten environmentalists and force them out of the area. They have installed boards warning not to interfere into their activities while barring the entry of anyone. These boards have been set up by replacing the hoardings of the wildlife and forest departments. We are requesting the current government and the relevant authorities to pay attention towards this problem in order to protect Muthu Rajawala.
A plan to develop the Mattala airport on a profit-sharing basis was revealed in Parliament today.
It has been planned to enter into a profit-sharing process for the Mattala airport instead of utilizing government funds. Moreover, the initial plans to develop the Jaffna and Batticaloa airports have been drawn. Although the Jaffna airport was declared open, it lacked basic facilities. We have drafted a fresh agreement with the Indian High Commission because the previous regime had complicated the matter. We will initiate it once it is signed. We intend to develop the Ratmalana, Katunayaka, Jaffna and Batticaloa airports to facilitate internal flying with the view to create a higher attraction towards tourist sites in the northeast. With the opening of our borders for tourists, we intend to further develop the Mattala and Ratmalana airport to attract more businesses to these airports.
Indian Minister of External Affairs Dr. S. Jaishankar ended his tour of Sri Lanka today and left the island this evening. The Indian Minister of External Affairs met with Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa last evening. Discussions were held on strengthening sectors that would be mutually beneficial to both nations. The Indian Minister of External Affairs met with opposition leader Sajith Premadasa yesterday. The opposition leader had expressed his gratitude to the Indian Minister of External Affairs for the funds provided by the Indian government for housing projects in Sri Lanka. The office of the opposition leader announced that the Indian Minister of External Affairs invited the opposition leader for an official tour of India. Representatives of the Tamil National Alliance, including its leader R. Sambandhan, met with the Indian Minister of External Affairs this morning at the official residence of the Indian ambassador to Sri Lanka. TNA leader R. Sambandhan said the discussions were held on India's stance on Sri Lanka's national issue, development of the northern and eastern provinces, and a number of other matters. In a tweet, the Indian Minister of External Affairs Dr. S. Jaishankar said that discussions were held on devolution and the provincial council system. The Indian Minister of External Affairs also met with representatives of the Ceylon Workers' Congress, including State Minister Jeevan Thondaman and the leader of the Tamil Progressive Alliance, Mano Ganeshan. Deviating from diplomatic hierarchy, the Indian Minister of External Affairs also met with leader of the United National Party, former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe.
The Colombo Stock Exchange reported a daily turnover of more than 9.14 billion rupees today, the highest reported in nearly 12 months.
Yesterday, benchmark index of the Colombo Stock Exchange, the ASPI, crossed 7,000 basis points for the first time since November of 2015, while turnover exceeded 7 billion rupees. Earlier this week, market capitalization at the Colombo Stock Exchange crossed 3 trillion rupees. The ASPI gained another 61.08 basis points today, 0.87% higher than yesterday, to close at 7,097.84. However, the more liquid S&P SL20 index closed in a negative today, losing 10.63 basis points, 0.39% less compared to yesterday.
Residents of Navala allege that the construction of a bridge connecting Navala and Atulkote is affecting a wetland in the area. Newsfirst Senator Senanayaka filed this report.
The marsh you see behind me is situated in Navala. It holds a vast biodiversity. It is estimated that about 8 endemic species of plants grow here. And it is also estimated that it stores up to 1.43 metric tons of carbon per annum emitted through the combustion of fossil fuels in the greater metropolitan region. On the 9th of November last year, the Cabinet had approved a proposal to construct a bridge across the Rajagiri-Navala Canal at a cost of nearly 1.7 billion rupees. The construction of the bridge connecting Angampitiya Road in Atulkote and School Lane in Navala that began recently is due to be completed in 9 months. But residents of Navala point out that the project carried out by the State Development and Design Corporation will negatively impact a wetland in the area. In a letter to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Residents insisted that the project will threaten the existence of vegetation covers and would destroy the rich biodiversity in the natural landscape. The letter adds that the aquatic fauna in the canal can be affected in the case of an accidental oil spill and toxic chemicals being released into the water body during construction. The lockdown phase is a good example of how much capable Colombo wetlands are at purifying air. Regulation of city air temperature is one essential benefit derived from Colombo wetlands. Is it the long-term benefits that we can gain from preserving wetlands that we should give priority to? Or is it temporary convenience? You decide. I'm Senitha Senanayake reporting for News First.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has appointed an 18-member commission to simplify existing laws targeting the welfare of the people.
The President's Media Division said that Presidential Advisor Lalit Veeratunga and Krishan Balendra, a business conglomerate leader, will head the commission. The commission is tasked with reviewing circulars and the procedure involved in issuing permits concerning the investment and construction sectors. In its statement, the President's office added that the Commission will also review rules and regulations on state finance and collecting tax revenue. Identifying efficient regulatory mechanisms by drawing comparisons with existing foreign systems is also among the responsibilities. The task of evaluating the room for corruption created by the complex system of laws and the identification of sectors in which laws could be simplified has also been vested with the newly appointed body. The Commission has been granted 90 days to fulfill the responsibilities given by the President.
And with that, wrap up Primetime News for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. For the News First team, I'm Sandru Ferdinando, and joining us tonight with our sign language interpretation was Taraka Gabriel.